My different journey started in 2006, at the end of August. Joanne and myself were at a boot fair, and we came back from it. She had a pain in the back, which we assumed was something to do with moving boxes. Over the next few months, we soon realised it wasn't that, it was something more serious. In December, she was admitted to hospital with a lung full of fluid, and then they found she had cancer cells in the fluid. That was in December. So in a very short space of time, we'd gone from no problems really to major problems. They said the cancer was quite an aggressive one, but they couldn't find the primary site. And then in January, she was deteriorated and got pneumonia. And the day that the oncologist came, they gave her 6 months to live, and she died in the middle of the night that night.
So my story began in 2005 really. Gary and I had been married for about 8 years, and he had an underlying condition that he'd known about since he was 17, called neurofibromatosis, which meant that he got sort of small lumps basically that grew in his body, but they usually didn't cause him any problems. They found a lump in his pelvis which was removed again, and we just thought things would go back to normal like they had done every other time. And after the surgery, he was very sick and was in intensive care for a while. And they came back after a few days and said that the tumour that they'd removed was a high-grade malignant tumour. And we just were completely shocked by that. We weren't expecting that news at all. And that basically they could do some chemotherapy to shrink the tumour, give him maybe some more time, but that actually there was nothing they could do, and that he had between 1 year and 3 years to live at that point. It was the last day of term for the summer holidays, and I'd taken the children to school. I came back home and he said that he didn't feel very well, and then he went out to the toilet and he said he called from there called my name, Paula, Paula, help me. And I went out to him and he was holding his head, and he said, I don't know what's wrong, there's something wrong. My head, and then he just collapsed to the floor. So I called an ambulance, and we obviously went to the hospital. And then the Sunday, which was 2 days after he'd gone in, he'd been a bit more well than he had been, and the children had spent time with him. They'd been up on the bed, just chatting with him, and had a really nice time, and we were able to talk about a lot of things. And then they decided they'd go home that night and not stay, because I guess he was a bit more well, and they went and stayed with my parents. And then his family came over to see him that night, and because he was a bit better, I thought, I'll go off and have a cup of tea with some friends, because I worked at the same hospital where he was. So I'd gone off to have a cup of tea with my friends, and then his brother came through after a few minutes and said, you need to come, there's something wrong. So I went back in, and his breathing had changed, and I just knew he was dying. And within probably 5 minutes, he died, and my whole world just fell apart right there. And then I thought, I've got to tell the children, and I knew it was the middle of the night, so I thought I'd go home and I was going to have to tell them in the morning. And I lay there all night just thinking that when they wake up, I'm going to have to tell them this thing that's going to ruin their life. And that was the worst thing I've had to do.
I was fortunate to have good family and friends around me who supported me and workplace. And one of my colleagues at work, who unfortunately son had died the year before, had put a leaflet in my pigeonhole when I went back to work around about the March 2007, saying about Widowed Young Support, Care for the Families project. And when I looked into it, I realised there was an event coming up in May, a weekend event in Bath. So I decided I was going to go on that. And that was when my journey with Care for the Family really started in May 2007.
So my first contact with Care for the Family was through a friend gave me the Care for the Family magazine, which had a small article in it about the support for those widowed young that was being carried out by Care for the Family at the time. So I immediately grabbed onto this thing. I phoned up, booked my place, and although I was a bit apprehensive and anxious about going to meet all these people in a vulnerable situation on my own, because I was in the mindset of I wanted to do everything I could, I was quite excited about it as well, quite sort of looking forward to meeting someone else, because I knew nobody else that had been widowed at 32. All my friends were married or in relationships. So I just needed to know there was someone else out there that understood really and that was going through what I was going through. So I went along to that weekend, met some really amazing people, felt really supported, really cared for, and really understood. And being understood was a really big thing to me in order to help me to begin to rebuild my life, because I knew from seeing others that were a bit further along on their journey that they once felt like I was feeling now, but this is where they were now. And you know, that was what was giving me hope. And it was at that weekend where I met Steve.
When we got there, I soon noticed Paula. I felt unsettled by my feeling, because I wasn't there to meet anybody. I was there for myself and my friends to sort of see how further forward I'd gone on my journey in the last year or so. But this feeling about Paula grew over the weekend, and I was a bit unsettled by that, and I was trying not to almost make contact with her, because there was something going on inside, and it was found that really difficult. But when we left on the Sunday afternoon after lunch, I was waiting for my two friends, because I was the driver, and I thought Paula had gone, but she was still there. So she was just about to drive away, and I just did a little wave, and I went over to her window. I said, you know, is it possible we could swap telephone numbers? So I've not really heard your story, and I'd really like to meet up with you again and hear your story about Gary. And she said yes, to my surprise. So my journey became different again, because I then was on a journey with Paula.
It was almost like we were setting out on this new path, that we were heading in a different direction, not one that we ever would have chosen, but nonetheless one that, you know, we were blessed to have a new opportunity, and we'd taken that. But we continued to try and rebuild a life together, and it was difficult in many ways, but also it's been such a blessing since then as well. Other people maybe not understanding has been quite hard, and I think to understand that when you lose someone that you love so deeply, that person can never be replaced, and for me to really live that out and understand that, and that I can never replace Gary, and Steve could never replace Joe. So our relationship is a completely different, new and separate thing, which has been a real blessing.
And I remember at the wedding, when I was making a speech, I had consciously made that point of let's raise a glass to Gary and Joe, because we don't want to forget these people. And that was something that was very powerful. I also remember saying to everybody that we would one day be doing supporting bereaved people, with those widowed young. We didn't know how that was going to happen then. We had no idea how that would come to pass, but I just felt led to say that to people, that we will one day be working in bereavement work.
So about 6 months after we got married, we were approached by Care for the Family and asked if we would like to train to become befrienders. So we went on and did that work for about 6 months. And then the people who were running the Widows Young Support Project at that time decided that they were going to retire, and therefore Care for the Family were looking for people to take over. And as Steve had already said earlier, we'd always felt since we'd met that we always wanted to be involved in supporting people in bereavement together as part of our future. And we've been coordinating the Widows Young Support for Care for the Family since April 2011.